In the previous episodes of Mysterious Music, we examined songs that are, or were, unidentified. Unidentified as in recordings that have surfaced on, say, a cassette taped off of an obscure radio broadcast, or some random mixtape found at a yard sale. Most recently on Mysterious Music, we investigated albums and songs that are confirmed to exist but have no known recording available. We refer to this as lost music. In some of these cases, a recording finally surfaced, such as the song Ready and Steady by D.A. In other cases, we only have a portion of the recording, such as the album Traces of Yesterdays by Overland. And then there's the song We've Been Taken to the Cleaners by Jimmy Buffett, which still hasn't been recovered at all, yet, if it indeed exists. I couldn't have compiled the amount of content covered in Mysterious Music without the contribution, curiosity, and knowledge of subscribers and Redditors, who have made me aware of some of these mysteries. For example, in the comments section of episode 4's Lost and Found, R. Linders made me aware of the Cloud Cult's album, The Shade Project. This out-of-print debut, with a similar obscurity to the Low Anthem self-titled LP, took me down a rabbit hole of numerous unreleased albums. Some by very well-known artists like the Beatles, Beach Boys, Deftones, and Prince, which eventually led me into this strange territory of albums that were released, but only with one single copy. In late 1987, shortly after founder and frontman Mr. Doctor recruited musicians through an advertisement saying, "A man is less likely to become great the more he is dominated by reason. Few can achieve greatness, and none in art, if they are not dominated by illusion." The Italian-Slovenian band Devil Doll was officially formed, and they recorded their debut album, The Mark of the Beast, at Tivoli Studios in Ljubljana. By February 1988, The Mark of the Beast was completed, with only a single copy being pressed. From 1989 to 1995, Devil Doll released 5 other albums. In 1997, they were slated to release their 7th album, The Day of Wrath, a soundtrack to a movie made by Mr. Doctor. But it never came to fruition. Since then, Devil Doll has been on hiatus. For 30 years, Mr. Doctor had managed to keep his identity a secret, but in 2007, it was revealed during the release of the book 45 Revolutions that author Mario Pansiera is Mr. Doctor. Cover art for The Mark of the Beast was painted by Mr. Doctor himself, and the only copy of the album and its cover remain in his possession to this very day. It seems Mr. Doctor considers The Mark of the Beast more of a painting than an album. Even though no other copies exist, excerpts have been included in succeeding Devil Doll releases. Music for Supermarkets is the 6th studio album by electronic musician and composer Jean-Michel Jarre. Not only was just a single copy pressed, but the album's master plates were deliberately set on fire. The Orambe show needed background music for its supermarket-themed art exhibit. Having been run by friends of Jarre, he agreed to compose the background music for the June 1983 run at the Jean-Claude Retail Gallery. When the Orambe show was over, the works of display were to be auctioned off. This inspired Jarre, who composed music specifically for this exhibition, to auction off music for supermarkets, treating it as a one-off piece of art.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about one-offs, and I've been really excited and involved with the kind of something that are not going to be reproduced and just one-offs. And this Music for Supermarkets project was about the idea of producing just one record, like a painting. And this record has been sold at an auction, like a painting.
The single copy was auctioned for charity at Hotel Drouot, and its master plates were publicly burnt, securing it as the only existing legitimate copy in the world. At the time, it immediately became one of the most expensive and collectible albums in history. The inside cover includes 12 slots, 11 of which have different Polaroid pictures showing the process of the album's creation. The 12th slot is left open for the auction winner to put their own personal Polaroid of Music for Supermarkets. The winner of this one-of-a-kind album was originally kept anonymous, but was later revealed to be Gerard, who paid 69,000 francs for it. His reason? Gerard had been in a car crash where he was knocked unconscious, and when he woke up, The first thing he heard was a radio playing a song called Souvenir of China, which happened to be recorded by Jar. To Gerard, he was in debt to Jar, and this opportunity was a sign that Gerard needed to own the sole copy of Music for Supermarkets. Shortly after the sale, Music for Supermarkets was played in its entirety on Radio Luxembourg. Bootlegs of the album were encouraged, with Jar himself telling listeners during the broadcast, "Pirate me." As a result, Music for Supermarkets can still be heard today thanks to these bootlegged recordings. However, due to the low quality of its AM broadcast, some fans have taken it upon themselves to recreate Music for Supermarkets in an attempt to better experience these songs. Even Jar, who continues to compose and record albums to this very day, has himself repurposed some of these songs, putting to use the surviving samples and multi-tracks for other compositions. Since 1987, Music for Supermarkets has been sold at least 2 additional times. Perhaps some of you are already familiar with the single copy album concept thanks to the highly publicized and criticized release, or lack of release, from our next entry. But before we get to that, please be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, become a patron at my Patreon, visit my website www.cwschultz.com where you can get to know a little more about me and my 4 novels, all available at amazon.com if you're interested in reading them. You can also read excerpts from my upcoming 5th novel, Whispering of the Autumn Leaves, as well as submit mysterious music you'd like to see covered on this channel. If you like short stories, perhaps you'll be interested in Aaron Califato's podcast, 7-Minute Stories. Some of you may recognize Aaron from his short story, The Yellowbird, a personal favorite of mine, which was featured on NPR. On the 7-Minute Stories podcast, Aaron tells nonfiction tales encompassing a variety of genres, and even features guests who read their own short stories. You can check out mine, simply titled Rooster, which is available now, only on 7-Minute Stories. The fact that 26 tracks by Wu-Tang Clan wouldn't be available to the public until the year 2103 was immediately met with negative responses. Once Upon a Time in Shaolin is a long-awaited album that is said to encapsulate the clan's legendary sound and style of the 90s. The album is, according to Skluze.com, presented in a hand-carved nickel-silver casing designed by the British-Moroccan artist Yaya and accompanied by a gold-leafed certificate of authenticity, a pair of customized PMC MB2 XBD speakers worth $55,000, and a 174-page volume containing lyrics, credits, and anecdotes on the production and recordings of each song. In March 2015, it was exhibited to a crowd of about 150 art collectors, dealers, and critics in Queens, and about 13 minutes of the album was played to them. But beforehand, these attendees had to be searched for recording devices in order to be admitted to the exhibit. Prior to the appearance at the Queen exhibit, it had arrived on an airplane where the casing had caught the eye of Border Patrol at the JFK International Airport. The explanation of the album's concept was so bewildering to Border Patrol that they detained the album for 3 hours to properly examine it. Once Upon a Time in Shaolin was produced and recorded in secret over a period of 6 years. A single 2-disc copy was pressed in 2014 and stored in a secure vault at the Royal Mansour Hotel in Marrakesh, Morocco. CD1 is subtitled Shaolin School, while CD2 is subtitled Allah School. Like Music for Supermarkets, all backups were destroyed. Ultimately, the album was sold through Paddle 8, a New York auction house, for $2 million on October 8, 2015, to pharmaceutical entrepreneur Martin Shkreli. More on this guy in a moment. This reported sum of $2 million even surpassed what a Beatles fan paid for Ringo Starr's personal copy of the Beatles' self-titled White Album, with the Sextuple 01 serial number embossment, which had sold for $790,000. Once Upon a Time in Shaolin's new owner, Shkreli, had been developing a pretty bad reputation in the media at the time. He received widespread criticism when his company, Turing Pharmaceuticals, obtained the manufacturing license for the anti-parasitic drug Daraprim, and then raised its price from $13.50 to $750 per pill, leading him to be referred to by the media as the most hated man in America. Seemingly embracing his role as a villain, Shkreli shared a few ideas about what he wanted to do with his prized possession. He considered selling it, then he toyed with the idea of destroying the album so that it couldn't even be heard in the year 2103. Shkreli even thought about installing it in some remote place so that people would have to make a spiritual journey in order to hear it. Either having buyer's remorse or losing interest in the prestige of owning the album, Shkreli eventually put Once Upon a Time in Shaolin on eBay, where he was able to get at least one bid for over $1 million. However, Shkreli was arrested for securities fraud before the sale could be completed, and ultimately, Shkreli was convicted of these charges, whereupon a federal court seized assets, including Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. What all three of these albums have in common is that the band, composer, group consider their album more of a work of art than music. In many ways, you'd think that you'd want to spread an art piece so that it can reach as many people as possible, giving everyone who's interested an opportunity to experience it. But then again, one can make the point that you must go to a museum to truly experience the brilliance of the masterpiece from, say, a famous painter or sculptor. For instance, buying a copy of the Mona Lisa isn't like going to the Musée du Louvre in Paris and casting your eyes on the actual brushstrokes of Leonardo da Vinci. In a world where so many things are mass-produced and available at the click of a button, it's reassuring to know that there are musicians out there that are trying to maintain the integrity of their medium, their art form. They want to avoid their piece of music from being just another thing on an assembly line. It's a concept that we're definitely not accustomed to, but it's an interesting point. It also makes you realize that without even listening to any of these albums, they still make you reflect, and perhaps even connect with others who are just as curious about it. It's a demonstration of how magical and powerful the art of music can be. Its impact isn't just limited to our sense of sound. So, with that, valued viewer, continue to keep your mind, eyes, and ears open, and thanks as always for watching.